Good Friday morning. It's Jerry Miller. Welcome to Real Talk. Thank you kindly for joining us on the I Love CVille Network. This show powered by the illustrious, the trustworthy, the credible, the Yes Team, Realtors, Keith and Yonna Smith. Fantastic program lined up for you. Our Vice Mayor, Heather Hill, on set with us. We're going to spend an hour picking her. Very intelligent brain, everything Charlottesville. We're going to focus on some housing topics today on Real Talk. Judah Wickhauer, our director, my friend, why don't you first go to the two-shot with the sun-kissed Keith Smith, fresh from the islands. Mi amigo, how are you?
You know, I say it all the time. I was doing any better to be illegal. We had a great time down in the Caribbean, celebrated our grandson's first birthday. So I was talking to my wife earlier this morning and going, I don't know where it's going to go for this kid because it don't get much better than that to have your first birthday in the Caribbean.
Yeah, your grandson's living the dream.
Apparently, grandparents dying.
Right. And it was an expensive vacation, my friend.
It was an expensive vacation and not without challenges, that's for sure.
That's right. Well, you have welcomed yet another rock star to the show.
I have. So Heather Hill is here. Everybody knows who Heather is, and she's the vice mayor. And I'm just excited about this opportunity to have a chat with her. We were going to have another gentleman with us from the city, but unfortunately there was a health issue at the last minute. So we will bring him back on because he is definitely a rock star. Spent a little bit of time with him in Portland a few weeks or months ago, I guess. But I'm going to let you do the basic intro, and then we'll move on from there.
All right. Studio camera, Judah Wickhauer. Heather, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. It's good to be here. And as I said off record, my voice is not 100%. So not only do we not have John today, which I'm certainly disappointed, but looking forward to coming back with him in the future, but I'm a little husky today. So apologies to all.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're heading down to the wire of 2019. How is your year treating you? How's everything going?
It's one of those things that sometimes it feels like it's been an eternity, but in another time it's like a blink of an eye. We had the swearing in yesterday of our 3 new colleagues that'll be joining us in January, and I cannot believe 2 years have passed since I was kind of standing in that role and holding up my right hand. And so it's just been, a whirlwind, to say the least.
Well, I don't want to speak for him, and you jump in here. I do want to say this. You're doing a heck of a job.
Oh, yeah.
Charlottesville is lucky to have you.
Well, you're too kind.
I truly mean that. I have tremendous respect for you. I think you're doing great work.
Well, I will say that every day I do wake up and I feel like there's much more that energizes me than brings me down, and that's kind of the equilibrium that I feel like it keeps me going every day. So really appreciate the support from the community.
Absolutely.
Well, again, we always bring rock stars on, and we talk about rock stars, and clearly Heather's one of them. I've been for 87 working in 6-7 jurisdictions, and you can spot somebody pretty quickly at the elected level that gets it and knows how to make things happen, and Heather's surely that. So, but I was thinking earlier with your hoarseness of your throat, so I have to tell this little bit of story. I'm going to tell on myself here. So as everybody who watched the show know, I have hearing aids in. And yeah, he knows what's coming.
This is a good story.
This is a good story, right?
I was looking forward to it.
So we arrived where we're going, and we go there every year for 10 years. And so the first thing I do is take a half-a-mile swim. So I get there, I jump in the water, and I'm swimming, and I'm going, oh my God, this is great. I can hear my bubbles, the boats, everything is great. This is wonderful. About a quarter mile out, I realized, I had my hearing aids in.
What happens to them when they're underwater?
Not good.
No, they're not good. So what happens with them is, even though I'm wearing them, they don't work. So the moral of the story is Heather has a harsh voice. I can't hear, so good luck.
That's why I made the comment that it was an expensive vacation. Not to embarrass you that you went to the islands, but because of the hearing aid issue.
That cost me $8,000.
Right, $8,000.
But I do have insurance, so we'll have to fight that one out.
All right, well, let's throw this to Heather. Not every day we get to spend an hour with the vice mayor. All right, let's talk about something that's on everyone's mind, and I think housing and affordable housing. We start with open-ended questions. How do you think we stand with our affordable housing scenario in Charlottesville, Virginia?
I think right now it's really challenging without having a real comprehensive strategy. And so at this point, We now have a consultant team that has been brought on board through an RFP process. It's going to both look at how we complete our comprehensive plan, because that's something that's certainly been lingering and on hold for some period of time. And then that will tie directly in with the housing strategy, and then ultimately a rewrite of our zoning code. And I think that's really kind of where the rubber hits the road is, how are you able to enforce some of those policies? And so for me, a lot of it, I mean, as much as people talk about dollars and the funding, as Keith and I have talked offline, it's really around the policy and the processes that we have to enable the affordability of housing. And a concern for me right now is just as we're investing in some things pretty significantly, making sure that those investments are going to hold the test of time, both in terms of are we able to kind of maintain the affordability as well as the quality of those units over a period of time. And so that's something that's certainly a consideration of mine when I consider where we're investing city dollars. I'm a big proponent of that we should be leveraging city dollars to invite others to the table. That's obviously what our Housing Advisory Committee looks at when it's allocating funds from our Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund, is that what proportion of this is city funding and how many other partners are at the table, and those scores get higher because it's important that we have partnership doing this. The city alone cannot, through funding, solve this crisis. At the same time, we have a lot of work to do to make those who want to come to the table to provide those units a more fluid process for them, as well as what can we do both locally and at the state level through our policies that kind of opens to the door to more options.
I love that. It's a good start there.
How much more time we have to fill? Because I think that pretty much handled it.
Great snapshot.
Great snapshot. So you mentioned something that maybe we'll pivot a little bit from our prepared notes on it, and as you were speaking, Heather, it popped into my head. So the state has changed, right? Mm-hmm. Right. We are Democratic now. Do you see any help coming from the state towards the city? And I guess what I'm referring to is the Dillon rule. Do you see, because in many levels, the local jurisdiction's hands are tied.
Sure.
Right? I know the city's a little different, right? But do you see any good, positive, affordable housing stuff coming from the city in your crystal ball, or it's going to be from the state?
I think that this is not just a Charlottesville issue, and I think that the good news for us is there's a lot of other jurisdictions who are passionate about this, and when we look at our legislative package, I mean, an angle I've encouraged us, to take, and I think has been done, is just make sure that if there are other initiatives or other priorities that are being pressed in other jurisdictions, how do we kind of combine that? And we've talked about that during the regional housing partnership meetings. How do we leverage even within our own region that we all are speaking the same message? Because this is not, to me, a partisan issue. I mean, this is housing, and this is a very foundational, need, human need. And so I think that I'm encouraged. I mean, we certainly leaned in well beyond housing, but on this current legislative package, not even knowing at the time when we were putting it together for certain what this composition of the next General Assembly was going to be. But I think there is a lot of opportunity here, and I'm hopeful that more of us will be able to spend more time in Richmond, because in the past, if I'm really honest, not even just about housing, but many things, you go down there, it's so frustrating to see all the energy that goes towards some things and then not even to get out of a committee. And so I think there's just a lot of positive energy in terms of what we can do, not just this year, but in the years ahead. Not everything's going to be accomplished in this first session of this General Assembly, but I certainly am encouraged by the energy throughout the Commonwealth for us to focus on this issue, and even at the state level with, through the governor.
So one of the exciting things about having Heather here is she is one of the members of the Regional Housing Partnership, which I chair, and just to kind of, that's the RHP, just to put a little bit of context to the conversation we had right now. The Regional Housing Partnership, actually is one of our goals is to try to communicate with the legislature in Richmond to try to tackle this from a more of a holistic and high level area. To go back to what I think Charlottesville is doing right in the affordable housing space. Two things, I think, and I know John isn't here, but hiring John was huge. Mm-hmm. He is a rock star. I had an opportunity to spend 2 days with him, got to know him real well. My prayers are out to him and his family.
Introduce us to John. I think a lot of folks don't know what John does.
Yeah. So I'm going to let Heather do that,
yes.
But I would like to finish my train of thought, if you
Sure.
don't mind, please. And the second thing that I am most excited about this is the engagement of the conversation from the current city councilors and, well, actually all the city councilors now because they were sworn in yesterday, they are really want to engage in this, and they really want to tackle this head on and figure out collectively and collaboratively how we can fix this. So to me, that's what's most exciting about the future. There's some struggles without a doubt. And I'm going to let Heather talk about John because she's got all kinds of notes there.
Well, it was just interesting because John and I anticipating to be here together. We did talk earlier in this week, and he brings such a unique perspective because he comes from another place in Virginia. His last job was with a different CRHA. He was with the Chesapeake Redevelopment and Housing Authority, and he was the director of community development and capital projects there. And so he comes and brings that kind of perspective as another locality. And when we were talking, he was like, when we were talking about strengths and weaknesses, he's like, the biggest strength here is, to what Keith was saying, is there's a real broad interest in supporting this. It's obviously the leadership level, at the city level, the nonprofit partners that are out there, the community is behind this, not just in terms of funding commitments, which is one thing, but in terms of just really wanting to come together at the table. And that's why it's so important that we do need to work together and figure out what are the barriers that are in place from allowing us to allow projects to flow smoothly through the pipeline and allow to maintain that affordability. John's title in the city in his current position is our housing program coordinator. And so, as he said, we are just so excited to have him. He brings a perspective of his past experience and then now coming into Charlottesville. And I think what he saw and the energy he saw here around housing is really what motivated him to want to make his professional time here in Charlottesville is where he's at. So
I won't get into too many personal details, but he travels like considerable distance one way every day to come to work, and he comes to work. And when we were in Portland, we had this conversation. Look, I want to live in Charlottesville, but I can't afford it, right?
And
so
coming from your housing coordinator, it's
from the housing coordinator.
I mean, more than three quarters of the people that work for the city can't afford to live in the city.
So he is a perfect example of that, right? So, the way I look at this thing, there's a deal to be, and I'm a deal guy, right? So we talk about this all the time, but there's a deal to be had here. If we have motivated elected officials, we have motivated staff, we have a need. There's just some things that are in the way that we need to clean up, some process things. I believe if we put everybody at a table, we can clean up those process things and then make some magic happen. But I can tell you, I'm excited about John being here. It raised my level of excitement of wanting to continue to work and provide affordable housing in this city. I will tell you, it's been challenging, as we've talked about before. But to me, when you have everybody at the table wanting to do something, that's when the magic happens.
I think one of the things, in this portion of the program, guys, thanks to Roy Wheeler Realty Company, a trusted real estate firm, and Roy Wheeler Realty Company. I mean, when half, and I'm just doing macro topic here, throw it to you, Heather. When half of city property is zoned for single-family detached homes, the opportunity to build and create density is not necessarily an option. I've never seen affordable housing been more in the news than in 2019. In fact, one of the folks that's going to sit next to you, and Michael Payne, that was a lot of his campaign, was affordable housing. So I guess throw this topic to you, half city property zoned for single-family detached homes, and maybe how that is impacting the landscape in Charlottesville.
Well, it's certainly a major factor, and it's something that we've talked about at length. I mean, people are focused on where is the available empty lots right now and how far can we go up and how dense can we make it. But the reality is that we have a huge opportunity, and how do we, scatter that density in a different way, but leveraging, our R1 zoning to do more for us. But it's not always an easy swap, because you have to incentivize people to then do something that's going to be affordable with that zoning, because as we know, Airbnbs can be an income stream for people. Right. And I think it's important to recognize that if as a city, we're going to have the onus on us that the zoning is just the first step. Then from there, it's like, how do you then encourage people? Because construction in this community is not insignificant. So if people were to build an accessory dwelling unit on their, what was an R1 and now is allowing for more density in our neighborhoods, you have to make sure that you're just not building a bunch of Airbnbs and that we're providing an incentive. And so as I mentioned earlier, I think it's been really frustrating for many of us, and even the people who are the most invested in getting through this process of finishing the comprehensive plan and getting to that housing strategy, how much time some of this takes. Yeah. And as we have learned from many projects, time is money. And the city says that even about our infrastructure projects, as I think about the Belmont Bridge, who's been every year that goes by, we only are inflating our construction costs, and that's the same in the housing market as well. And so we have to be more expedient about getting these systems in place. And you know me, I'm the systems engineer, but let's lay the foundation of our strategies and then into our zoning, and then let's figure out what is going to be the best levers to pull to put those into action towards what we want. I mean, I believe, especially considering the investment that this city is making, we need to have measurements in place to understand, are we really getting what we thought we were going to get for that X $1 million investment? And what metrics are we using to gauge that? Because that's going to help us to drive future investment and projects down the road. And I'm sorry, I never hold back from this, but kind of peeling off of the regional housing partnership, this cannot be, I'm sorry, I'm stomping my feet, a city-only issue. I go out of my mind. We are such a small footprint in the grand scheme of this. And I realize there's benefits because we want to keep in the urban area, but there's an urban ring that does not belong to our decision-making. Sure. And I'm just baffled at how different even just the community is. Like, we were at a planning commission meeting, really well attended, talking about our capital projects. And the whole room was full, and mostly with housing advocates. And I just looked at my colleague that was there, because we were there for these joint hearings, and I said to her, what do you think is going to happen when the county has their version? Where are these people going to be demanding that of them? I don't understand that. Many of those people are from the county and coming to these meetings that are city meetings. And I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about this.
I can tell.
I
like it.
It's just mind-boggling to me that we don't recognize that so few of us know where that actual border of the city is. And we are a region that needs to tackle this problem together.
So that is...
Love that.
The foot was stamping, and I got a little nervous. I gotta say, I got a little nervous. My wife has done that before, so I know what it means. So usually meant I was in trouble, so I was getting a little bit.
No, there's no person in trouble. I'm asking the community.
But Heather, literally, it was 2.5 years ago. That was the premise of the motion I made at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, to create the RHP. Mm-hmm. And as you know, the RHP is these 4 pillars, right? But it's regional, right? We need to bring in wholeheartedly. Charlottesville alone can't solve this problem. A lot of people look to UVA the same way, right?
Sure.
And they say, UVA fix this. Well, UVA can't fix it on its own. Or they would say, Albemarle County, you need to fix this on, or some other counties. I will share some information with you that just happened recently. So I received a phone call a couple of days ago from a couple of Louisa County Board of Supervisor members, which I will remain nameless. Louisa County, now for 3 decades I've been dealing with that world, don't want to talk about housing, don't care about housing. They are reaching out, in this case to me, as a shared regional housing partnership, and say, hey, look, we have land and we want to give it for affordable housing. Now, it's outside the urban ring, it's outside of Charlottesville, we have to talk about transportation and how this is all going to work. The fact that they are making that phone call, I can't say the word huge because I get into trouble, is big. Right? It's a Brooklyn thing. It's a word that everybody says in Brooklyn. But so, okay, I'm just going to say it. It's huge for them to want to do that. And then Fulvana County, right, of all the jurisdictions for the last summit for the Regional Housing Partnership, gave money to sponsor it. That's huge. Mm-hmm. So they are starting to have this conversation. They are starting to have it. Anytime that I am chairing a thing and they say, well, Heather in Charlottesville needs to fix this problem. Time out. No, we're not going there. So I would encourage you to keep the path. I know I'm vehemently working on it on a regional thing, but I do want to jump a little bit into what my cohort here, our chemistry is working today, is this A1 or this single family detached or R1S, which is residential 1 or
What are your thoughts about the concern I raised about, it's one thing to just allow the zoning
Oh, I have very specific thoughts about that.
Great.
So, as you well know, I'm part of the cohort, right? The ADU cohort that the city has funded. Just recently came back from Portland, and well, Portland was your portion of it, and I've been doing some work on my own with some relationships I have in Seattle on it. But what Portland and Seattle has done, and actually the state of Oregon as a statewide, that's the reason I kind of opened up with the state thing. It's a horrible name. They call it the RAP, Residential Infill Program, like rest in peace kind of RAP. But what they've done is they've said in the city of Portland, or in the whole state of Oregon, single-family residential now can put 4 residential units on. So they've increased their density on the SFD, single-family detached, up to a maximum of 4. Ton of rules, ton of regulations. What do you need to do? What you don't need to do?
What's the lot sizes? Just give me a.
Oh, same as Charlottesville.
Okay.
Some of them are smaller. It's so I've been promoting this concept with whoever would listen to me. It's a way to increase density, but not go with your multi-stories. It's very artfully done. I was in a bunch of work sessions. I mentioned to you, I had coffee with the mayor of Seattle and the mayor of Portland, talking about how they're actually doing this, how you're matching the zoning side, not to get too geekish on it, but the zoning side with the building side, right? Right. So if I have a single structure and I'm making 4 units out of it, the zoning might say, hey, look, you can do this. The building side is going to go, oh, by the way, this needs to be a 2-hour wall, this needs to be a 2-hour wall, this needs to be a 2-hour wall. So how do you navigate that? So they're working through that, and they're making progress. I'm also rather passionate about ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units.
Me too.
Not the silver bullet, right? We talk about this all the time. There isn't a silver bullet to this problem. There's a silver buckshot, right? I've stole my dear friend Robert Liberty's line, and I hope he's not listening. But in any event, so how Portland has navigated the Airbnb question, because that was their big concern. Their big concern is Keith came in Belmont, I put an Airbnb back, or I did one of these 4 units. If I get a bit wordy, somebody stop me. What they did is they said, look, what we're going to do is if you put an Airbnb in the back of your yard and you're going to say it's for affordable housing and you're going to commit that it's for 80% AMI, we, Portland, will give you a $15,000 tax relief.
You're saying you're not going to do Airbnb. You got me confused.
I apologize, I did it reverse. If you were building it for affordable housing. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah. We will give you a $15,000 tax credit, plus there's a streamlined approval process. Right. Plus you don't have to pay connection fees, and there's a series of benefits. But you have to commit, I believe it's for 30 or 40 years. But I'll get you all the information.
No, and that's what I was getting at. I was like, these are the systems that we have to have in place to incentivize.
So, do you mind if I
keep going? Yeah, I'm learning.
So I made a proposal to both Portland's City Council and Seattle City Council using the land trust model to do this. So what would happen is the land trust would actually would either buy a piece of property, right, and would sell off the front end of it, either to affordable housing, which is what we would do, and the back half of it. So as long as the land trust owned the land, it would be forever affordable, right?
But the more common, let's be honest, the more common case would be, let's just use Jerry as an example. Jerry has a house. He wants to create a second accelerated dwelling unit in the back. He's trying to figure out what is the right approach. Should he go Airbnb or should he not? He owns the land, it's his. He's a private owner. Then how do you see that playing out?
So then it becomes an ROI, right? Return on investment for Jerry, right? We say, okay, Jerry, if you wish to make it an Airbnb, you don't get the $15,000 credit. You don't get I think the connection fee is $10,000 for the city water and sewer.
Line,
you don't get the discount there. You don't get the fast track thing. There's value there. And then Jerry makes a decision, right? An ROI, and he goes, look, I can do that. I can commit to that for 30 years or whatever.
Don't think most people are going to go down that road. I mean, I'm a businessman.
Sure.
Okay. I'm looking for the best return on investment. And the best return on investment for me in that scenario, probably to maximize the margin, is an Airbnb. However, that comes with headaches. The best return on investment, the safest for me, would be to get a tenant in there, like I'm doing with this building, do a 5% increase on rents every single year, say you're responsible for all appliances, all upkeep, you have to use my preferred subcontractors to do any work if anything goes wrong,
Sure.
and your rent's going to go up 5% every year, and if you don't like it, move out, I'll find somebody else, because housing supply, the demand is ridiculous, and there's no housing supply. That's what I would do.
So, but I did a side-by-side ROI analysis. It's not necessarily that way. But,
Okay.
what you're discounting
Uh-huh.
is people wanting to do the right thing. That's what you're not. And maybe the right thing is making money or whatever. But there are a group of people. Keith and Yonna Smith, a prime example. You know, I would buy a house in Belmont, and I would do this. I don't have to make a huge ROI on that, but I'm also not going to pay for it either, right? So
I think there's a difference between the differences in return versus just having
Sure.
a return. I mean, I
Sure.
think that for some people it's just like you don't want to lose money on this, but I
Sure.
do believe that there's a lot of interest and giving back in that way, and but we have to make it easy for people,
Sure.
easier for people.
I
So I think in every jurisdiction is going to be different what that balance looks like.
Sure.
So as we go through the housing strategies, what is that amount we have to subsidize as a
Sure.
city given our current market structure and the demands and other options that people like you might have?
Here's an example that the city can work on. So the ADU ordinance, current ordinance, and I've been preaching this for a while, does not allow the land trust to buy. We can't buy because it's required to be an owner occupied. So Seattle and Portland has removed that requirement from it, plus did this tax incentive, and they are building between 300 to 400 units a year. Now the city's much larger, right? It's 3 million or something like this. And
Yeah, thank you for giving that some context.
Yeah.
Because
You can't put, but even if we're able to do a small percentage, it's still a good thing. But they're using that same model in this quad scenario that they're using, right? Where I'm taking a single family detached lot or an existing home and I'm breaking it into 4 residential units, right? They're using the same model. If it's not Airbnb, you're getting a discount, tax incentive, connection fees, process being sped up. So they feel very strongly that it'll have the same result that the ADU did on it.
For the sake of the talk show, let me play devil's advocate with
Sure.
both you guys here. This portion of the show, thanks to Mac Weems State Farm.
Oh, yeah,
Great
cool.
solution right there in Mac Weems State Farm. Okay, so I live in Redfields, urban ring. Okay, if I'm able to take my 0.6 on a cul-de-sac, and I'm able to chop it up and put 4 housing opportunities on there, my neighbors will say this. They're going to say, that's going to create traffic issues,
Sure.
more parking, more vehicles on the road. That's going to create headaches because the road was not set up for 4 houses to be here, so it's going to create damage to the road. What's going to happen to our view from the backyard? Are we going to have this wooded, we back up to the preserve property. Are we going to have this serene? Are we going to see the deers? Are we going to see 20 more people playing in the backyard, which then impacts our quality of life? And the list is going to go on, and on. That's the not in my backyard mindset.
NIMBY.
The NIMBY mindset.
Yeah, sure.
Throw that out there and how that's going to play in Charlottesville, Virginia, because we know, I follow him on Twitter, we know, that is huge.
Yeah. So this would probably, in my personal opinion, work much better in the city than out in the urban ring. Because let's face it, you've said this before. You've lived in some rentals as a student
Yep.
with multiple people in it. This happens. It happens. They're illegal, but that happens. So I think Redfields is probably not a good example as far
So you
as
say maybe a 10th and Page is a better example.
10th and Page, yeah.
And we have Jason from Marie Bet watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where, again, we're getting way into the weeds, but part of the requirements to do this, it has to be close to some sort of public transport, right? In Seattle and Portland's case, it's light rail. In our case, it could be a bus route, right? So there's a bunch of criteria. It's just not a, hey, you can go do whatever you want kind of thing, but what it's intended. So, Jason is watching, so, in 10th and Page, you could take a particular property like that as long as it's within a certain distance of a bus route, meets a bunch of criteria. it may make sense.
But it's not to say you're not going to have NIMBYism in every neighborhood in the city of Charlottesville either, as we have seen when anything comes in front of us for any kind of special use. But I will say that anything that comes in front of us for a decision, affordable housing conversation is always at the forefront.
Sure.
I do want to speak about the transportation, though, because earlier you're talking about some of the outlying counties
Sure.
and being willing to put housing out there. And I would argue even like in the city, transit, and this is the systems engineer, me speaking, is such a huge component of the success of anything related to housing.
You cannot separate the two. They have to be concurrent. They have to run simultaneous, and you cannot do one without the other.
And I feel that way. People, when they think of the university, they often focus on the students and how many students are here and where are we going to place them. My focus actually is on the employees.
Yeah.
And as the university and the hospital system, the health system grows, the thousands of employees that are coming from like over the mountain or from, or even from the east side, and, what dynamics that has without having a better transit system also makes it really challenging.
So actually bumped into Brad with
Jaunt,
thank you, yesterday. And, there's ways to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, everybody just needs to be at the table. Everybody has to have a constructive conversation. Everybody has to not do this, right?
Right.
To do this, let's come together and let's figure this out together. When we start doing this, nobody's gonna get.
Keith, I can't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I mean, the finger pointing way beyond housing has been something that's really been a continued challenge for me in the role that I'm in, because I truly believe that as a community, we share so many of the same priorities. The manner in which we go about achieving those goals are different, but we have to be able to recognize where we have this shared vision and work together, because too often there is the finger pointing, and that gets us nowhere.
Well, so you know what happens when you do that, right? 3 of them are pointing back at you, right? Every time you point your finger at somebody. Again, this was my whole vision with the RHP, setting it up, is to put people together. We might have all different political views and thoughts on something.
Just to have the conversation.
No, I can honestly tell you, everybody in that room respects each other.
Well, and housing, even though we disagree on many things.
Sure.
And I'm sure if we got into other topics in those RHP meetings that we would probably have a few little brawls, but
well, I try to prevent that the best I can.
But when it comes to housing, there is a shared commitment here, even though it looks very differently in some of the more rural areas as it does in the urban area. And that's why I just think there's a really ripe opportunity to come together across party lines even and really do something impactfully at the state level to kind of just to have different rules by which we are governed in this area. And I'm certainly encouraged by that. And I think it's been so valuable just to hear the perspectives of other elected officials and those from the outlying counties, because their problems are very different, the lens from which they view this. And here they are offering something they have a surplus of, which in many cases is land. And how do we leverage that to help solve these issues?
So at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, we started several years ago, and we do it on our Regional Housing Partnership, as you know. We always do a roundtable. And, particularly with the commission, there's 6 jurisdictions represented there. And sometimes you would have the mayor talk about what's going on in the city, and then somebody from Fluvanna County, like myself, or Nelson, would chime in and go, whoa, I'm having the same problem. And it ends up turning into this really long, everybody kind of rushes the meeting to get to that point, but the dialogue is, very progressive and moves the needle forward.
We have, let's get to some comments here. We have reporters from every media outlet watching the show right now. CVille, Daily Progress, NBC 29, and CBS 19. This portion of the show thanks to Mike Bittrick and First Heritage Mortgage. This comment comes in. This is from Ray Cadell, who's in real estate. This is a good comment here. He says, I met just this week with a single mother who just got her housing voucher after being on the waiting list for 13 years. Further, she can't find a landlord with a vacancy willing to accept her voucher. Fair market rent versus allowable rent is not in sync. Seems to me to be an easy place to start with perhaps some of our folks in council is the city or county monthly contributions to encourage more landlords to provide more affordable housing. There are vacant properties, especially in the city right now, that might offer this solution with some encouragement from the city. This is an interesting topic. I have heard this from some of our landlord friends as well. Yeah.
I was going to say, so our housing advisory committee has certainly been engaged in conversations around this, and there's a different name I think we're giving it now, but it was like a landlord risk reduction. What can we do to remove the barriers for landlords? And I know that some of the folks on our policy subcommittee have actually taken a draft version of what's been put together, and they want to actually put it in front of actual landlords. Because my whole thing is, don't put it in front of council until you know that you actually have a swath of landlords who are going to be willing to participate in this way, because otherwise we're just back where we started. And so I'm encouraged by those efforts and the approach that the committee is taking proactively to really reach out to those who actually can help us solve that issue, obviously with the support, in this case of the city, in ways that how do we reduce that risk? And some of it's financial, some of it's that there's some backing and in terms of just some assurances for things. And so I'm feeling positive that we are trying to take a real proactive approach with that, but it is certainly a concern that is well shared, well beyond the city even.
But isn't that John's forte? Isn't that what John Sales has really been hired to handle and manage? Do I understand that correctly?
Certainly. I mean, and honestly, in the case of many of our commissions and boards, they work with our staff hand in hand. And at the same time, there is certain capacities that we have, and I'll be the first to admit that we need more capacity in terms of resources internally for this area of focus. But we also, it's important that we are inviting community stakeholders, as you said. It takes a lot of people coming to the table.
I was not insinuating that not
way.
to reach out, because I think that's a genius idea, to reach out to the landlords. But I guess what I was trying to get at, that was part of the reason you hired John, or because this is part of his skill set. He understands how to navigate this, and at least based on my conversations with him, and to put together, like you said, any opportunity to involve the public, and landlords are public, just like we're public. As you were speaking, it made me think of the back end of my trip down in St. Martin, which they ended up with riots, and we had a hard time to get off the island. And the reason we had a hard time getting off the island is the French government unilaterally changed its zoning laws for the island and changed its title for the island. And some of these families, these Creole families, have been living on their land, since the abolishment of slavery in 1848. And the French government said, if by August 1 you can't provide title, we're going to remove you from your property. Never engaged the local people, never spoke to the local people. French government shut down the internet for 4 days, which was good. It didn't work. So, it's an extreme example of not engaging the public. And I'm encouraged that that's the right answer. You bring in the landlords and say, hey, this is our plan.
It's literally what Ray just said. Talk to the landlords first, which I
don't tell Ray this, but he's a genius.
I mean, it's very straightforward from a business standpoint. It's figure out if there is demand for this.
But and I get that, but you can't.
Not even just a demand, but a willingness that with these
participate.
Just like we talked about with the ADUs,
But you cannot not engage the public. And, the business, I'm a business guy, I get all that. But if you don't bring the public along and educate them through the process, you end up like we ended up with on an island trying to get out.
Well, and the other part about the engagement is just an awareness of some of the programs that we have. I mean, because we've had times where things have been underutilized, but it's really like, how do we make sure that people are aware of the options they have and that some of these programs that are in place to try to alleviate these concerns?
So I'll give another shout out for the Regional Housing Partnership. As you know, that is our highest priority, is to create a website with some multiple one port. And it's going to take quite some time to get there and a lot of revenue. But you're 100% right. I hear this as a real estate agent all the time. Where do I get information?
And there's a group of folks more informally, the Housing Hub, and we are aware, and I was the one that connected the dots, that some of that same conversation was happening among that group, and how do we then partner with the Regional Housing Partnership to have a central repository where this information can be sought and people know where to go.
This is an interesting point, and it kind of fits to what we're discussing. James says, from Alabama, there's a small percentage of people that can add or upgrade an existing building on their property to offer an ADU to a family. Seems like folks with money are able to do ADUs. And I have a tendency to agree with that.
No, and he's 1,000% right. So, those who know, James is my brother-in-law. He's a planner.
You've got like in-laws everywhere.
He really does.
I do.
Yes,
yeah.
Italian.
So he's an actual planner by trade. He has a master's degree from UVA in urban planning, and travels around the country working for DOD bases and stuff like that. But James is an African American, right? I got 2 African Americans in my brother-in-law, in my family. You're 100% right. Most of the people are going to look like us, and they're going to be affluent. But go back to the point of doing the right thing. I think there's enough people out there willing to do the right thing that will not. I don't have to make 30% return on my money or 40% return on my money. But if I can generate a residential unit and not cost me anything, why wouldn't I do that? And there's enough people out there to do that.
But on the other end, there's also folks who are struggling to afford
That's
to
exactly
stay in
right.
the city. And this is an avenue for them to continue to. And it's more difficult if they're actually having to build that unit. But if it's zoned in a way that they already have the structures in place and they can divide them in a way that allows them to rent part of their property, it makes it more sustainable for them to go off the headwinds of obviously taxes are increasing every day in this market, which is also another challenge that we're trying to face. Because as we look at how do we fund to support further affordable housing, are we making it even less affordable for the people that we really want to maintain in the community?
So the main reason I was asked to do these presentations in Seattle and Portland was to stop gentrification. And so what they wanted to hear was my plan that I mapped out of using the land trust. So Jerry has been living in Belmont for generations, his families and generations, but they're being priced out, right? They can't stay there. But now they want to do wealth creation. They want to create an ADU to go ahead and get some revenue coming so they can afford to stay in Belmont, but they don't have the capital to do it. They can't borrow the money to do it. They've never done it before. They've never managed property before. So what happens is the land trust would come in and actually sign a lease with Jerry for the land, and then underneath the ADU, right? And then we would build it. We would rent it out, and we do a profit sharing relationship with Jerry. So the land trust would receive X amount of dollars from the rent. Jerry would receive X amount of rent, and then there's some buyout scenarios. So it was a pretty detailed model that I built on it, which they've been very excited about. I'm going back out a couple more times to help them kind of function this a little bit.
And that works under the assumption that Jerry is going to be staying in that property in perpetuity.
So Jerry stays in the main structure.
But I'm just saying, like,
Long term,
because otherwise
there's all deeded
it becomes an issue.
restrictions. There's all kinds of. I mean, I'm trying not to get into the weeds on it, but there's a path there that works on it. So, because Jerry, one of the things they found out in Portland is that, which was disastrous. If Jerry's never built something before, never went through this process before, never was a landlord, what happened was Jerry would rent it to me, would go out and borrow money to do it, rent the unit to me, and I wouldn't pay Jerry, and Jerry got foreclosed on.
Yeah. That will happen.
It did happen,
Yeah.
and they immediately, that's really the real reason I'm communicating back and
the
forth
other
with them.
benefit is that the people who are initiating this work have gone through this process
That's
before.
exactly right.
Whereas Jerry just going out there doing it
That's
one time
exactly
only
right.
for the first time, you already, as we know, Keith, have had your own hurdles, and someone who does this regularly, let alone someone who's coming at it as a novice.
I had to go to the Caribbean and drink a lot of rum to get over it. Just saying. Just a joke. I'm just kidding.
I don't think he's kidding.
No, I'm not.
This portion of the program, thanks to Mike Bittrick and First
Yeah.
Heritage Mortgage. We have folks in Richmond, Northern Virginia, Charlotte, Nashville, and outside Philly watching right now. So the landlords around the mall, we get together, have coffee often. This literally topic came up last week of the increased taxes. And one of them said, they increase our taxes, and we just pass it along to the tenants.
Triple
And
net
the
lease.
tenants then raise their rates, and their customers are the ones that suffer the burden of the increased taxes, which is further gentrifying our community. The landlords are not going to absorb it. They're going to pass it down to who's renting from them. And then the people who are renting from them are just going to increase their rates so the average Joe has less disposable income in their pocket. Why don't I give you that topic right there?
Really?
I mean, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. So am I supposed to come up with some genius answer to that?
It's vicious.
It's vicious, but it's 11 o'clock, brother. There's no way we're going to be able to fight that thing out. The only thing I can answer to that is, there's a balance here, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody way smarter than me needs to figure out where that balance is, because if the city charges more taxes, it will flow down to Keith and Yonna Smith. And Keith and Yonna Smith will say, well, I'm not going to go get that ice cream there. I'm going to go get that ice cream someplace else because I'm paying for that. Right. With all due respect, I don't think we can tackle this on our show.
How can we keep market trend? How can we keep capitalism from working?
Yeah. So, I'm a believer in capitalism. I lived under communism for a half a decade. I understand this better than anybody. But I will keep on going back to what we started the show about. It's communication. It's people talking to one another. It's your group sitting down with Heather and the city and saying, okay, guys, this is how this is affecting me. Of 30-something years of doing this, what I found out is even though the hearts are in the right place, sometimes they don't quite understand the impact on you. Your heart may be in the right place. You are good people, mm-hmm. right? Nobody's here trying to hurt anybody. But you may not understand their world, right? You may think you understand it, but you don't necessarily understand it. And the only thing I could promote to that is everybody sitting down and having a conversation.
And that's why I have so much respect for you, Heather.
I agree.
Is because you come at this from, a good place. You love Charlottesville. You have a mind for entrepreneurship and business, and you understand what's happening out there.
I'm sure she has that, but it's an open mind. That's the difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference. It's an open mind. And certain folks in my world and your world and Heather's world have very closed minds, and they're unwilling to listen.
Agreed.
Excuse me?
And he said agreed. He agreed.
Yeah. Thank you. The hearing aids kind working.
Yeah.
And you were talking specifically, obviously, along the mall, and that's affecting businesses. And obviously, we certainly hear from the community around how that those increases affect everyday folks who are trying to maintain their properties and live in the properties they're in. We also hear from the nonprofit community, who we've gotten questions around, can you not give a break to nonprofits? Music Resource Center was one that has written to me, reaching out and just explaining how much they're paying in taxes now, and they still want to be able to stay in the urban center and provide their services to the youth of our community. And so it is a battle, and I struggle with it. But I want to speak to the business side, because I've always struggled with how do we, in layman's terms, and illustrate to this broader community, some of which don't want to hear the word business.
Sure.
Explain that the success of that ecosystem
I love where you're going.
Is so critical to us investing in all the things that they care about. And I have talked to people at the chamber about this. I've talked to our own economic development folks. We need some kind of visual, like you're a branding person like me. Like, how do we really just break this down to just something that we all can see and understand, just that whole ecosystem of how the dollars flow? Because I get so frustrated when I hear folks really speaking down, like even you just saying what you said. I'm sure that there's folks that are just like, well, who cares about the businesses? Who cares about the businesses? They provide the jobs.
Right. They create the tax revenue.
They also are the one, many times are ones inviting tourism in, which is dollars that just get spent here and then they go away. We don't even have to pay for infrastructure for those folks. And so I feel like you say tourism, you say business, and it's like, those are naughty words. And we are missing the boat and understanding. And I was at the Charlottesville Albemarle Visitor Bureau. I may be joining that board after the new year, and just how do we communicate like this important piece of our local economy is what allows us to really invest in the things that we all truly care about and that matters at home. And so
that is my most favorite statement ever said on this program. Right there.
So I have Elizabeth Cromwell coming on in the end of January, and I'm thinking maybe putting you two together and across from us.
I would love to come and talk with you.
Would be great. So people ask me all the time, why do I sit on all these half a dozen boards and commissions and car board and all that stuff? It's I've been blessed. Maybe I think I have the ability to communicate well with folks, but trying to bring folks together to me is the key, right? And the folks that may say this to you, they honestly believe that, right? And that's okay. You have to respect that. But when folks talk to me about that, I said, "Do you have a personal house budget?" And they go, "Yeah." I said, "Okay. So how does that work?" I said, "What do you mean, how does that work?" "Well, you have like money coming in, money going out, and you want to have some left over, right?" "Well, guess what? You run a business. It just happens to be your house. So, you have money coming in, money going out, you have money left over. What do you do with that money?" "I go out and buy things." "Great. Business got money coming in, money going out. What do they do with the thing? They buy more buildings, they hire more people, they do all that stuff. It's not any different. It's just bigger or smaller, depending on
And so
one's
many of these
business.
businesses are small. They're
Sure.
not that far different from your own personal household.
80% are technically small businesses.
And when I talk to a lot of my restaurant friends, I mean,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is has been a tight time for them for some time. And they obviously have their employees that they're considering. They have the rents, as you're acknowledging. And obviously, even when we consider the meals tax, even though that's a pass-through, that has an impact. And we all have to recognize the impact that has longer term on us being able to generate revenue from those sources if we're going to crunch them.
So I'm going to call them out, but you know who gets this right? Who really does well at this and understands this? One of our sponsors.
What?
Marie Bet Jason.
Yeah.
Totally gets it, understands it, runs a good business, gives back to the community. Just a rock star of an individual. Him and his husband, and Will, who I think they're partners in that. So there's an example. There's a business. You can just
They were one of the ones in my head when I said that. I also know that.
When somebody goes back to me, I would say, "Well, do you like Marie Bet?" "Oh, I love Marie Bet." "Well, they're a business. So it's okay to like them, but not okay to like somebody else." So it's really just a matter of communication and really respecting the person on the other side.
And I will say there are other businesses that have a greater capacity.
Sure.
And I think that if we aren't having a more collaborative approach with them, why would they want to participate in that way? Why do they want to be part of that dialogue? I mean, there's other examples, and I'll be careful about. I've just seen that frustration that I think we've turned off a lot of folks who have the means to really contribute in meaningful ways just because of the dialogue and just the nature of our community and its view on business.
1,000% agree with that.
Again, I hate to bring up the Regional Housing Partnership all the time, but this is part of the reason, because we have private sectors folks on there, bankers, UVA, and the intent is for everybody to start an open dialogue. I am more than confident we will get there. It's just people just need to start talking to one another.
This portion of the show, guys, thanks to Pearl Certification,
Oh, yeah.
also Bill Tucker of Charlottesville Settlement Company. Some of the comments coming in. Mary Francis says, transportation is vital to housing. We need transportation to drive affordable housing. Bellamy Brown, hello. Love you, Bellamy Brown.
Semper Fi, Marine.
Best chance for affordability in the area is to build a transit system around Louisa, Waynesboro, Fluvanna, Richmond, and D.C. That comment was put on the thread. The transportation piece is being emphasized. We followed what Virginia's doing. They bought some rail track. I think it was 200 plus miles of rail track. That was announced, I believe, yesterday.
Yesterday, the governor announced it.
Yeah, the governor announced that. I'm very excited about that.
They're building a bridge across the Potomac, a second bridge, which will open wide open. I think it's, and James will chime in on this, I think, but it opens up the Richmond, D.C. corridor a little bit better. It doesn't help us out too much here in Charlottesville because we use a different track line.
Right.
But any opportunity to increase
because it creates a precedent for future growth. Throw this.
And I was going to say, just around transit, and I'll be the first to admit, I'm the city person sitting here. We have to have a system that works well, or people won't use it. And if they're not using it, it's just this chicken and the egg. And so, I'm certainly confident we have a new director of our CAT, Charlottesville Area Transit. I think is the regional. The RTP, the Regional Transportation Partnership, looks at what steps it can take to more formally have a regional approach in a more structured way. I mean, this is so critical, and we have to do it with partners. As you know, like John is another component of that. There's different services that different resources provide, and obviously the university has a piece in that too. But I could not agree more that transit and housing just go hand in hand.
I think they had a Cherry Avenue.
They had an association meeting, a neighborhood meeting
last night. I believe so. Right? I believe so. Yeah. And I believe I think it was
small area plan.
Yeah, it was Nick from the
We're trying to wrap that up right now, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to talk about this transportation and housing thing, there's a couple of parcels on Cherry Avenue that I've been trying to negotiate with and trying to do something with that would be the solving both problems. You can put a multi-family affordable housing unit or mixing.
The old Kim's Market.
I didn't want to.
Okay, but we all know though.
But I've been trying for 3 years to figure a plan out with that brings all these partners in together. Because guess what it's got? You got
access.
You got bus transportation there. Walking distance to UVA hospital, walking distance to downtown mall, but frankly, it's a cash thing, it's a capital thing, right? The price is a little bit high, but my hope is that between some partnerships that I'm trying to put together and the city, that would be a great opportunity. The city's going to have to do some creative zoning stuff. Some ZTAs and some different things to allow increased density, increase height over there. But it's not specific about a piece of land. But that's a perfect location to do it because you have your transportation component there. Somebody who wishes to go to Wegmans can take a bus to Wegmans. Somebody who wants to go to UVA can go to UVA from there.
Perfect spot for it.
It's very
Literally.
central. Yeah. And I will say, though, that because you brought the small area plan, I'm interested in seeing what that final output is because that is going to be an important template from which people will then develop in that corridor because that has had a really big component of community engagement. So we're going to have to kind of have that in our back pocket.
Nick was copying it yesterday at the Planning District Commission. I was kind of staring over his shoulder, kind of reading it. I think you're going to be impressed with it. It's going to be really neat.
You were getting a lot of props. Yonna says bravo, Heather. Louise is watching in North Downtown, and she says, thank you, Heather, for your service.
Amen.
Spencer, who's watching from Belmont. Heather, I have tremendous respect for what you're doing for our city. And that's just a few of the comments that are being left here. Kyle Irvin, welcome to the program. He says people are being pushed further and further into the county because housing is so expensive. This is so true. This is a problem. However, our inner city neighborhoods are still very underserved. I'm not going to be able to get to all these comments. We have 3 minutes left here in the program.
But I want to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, I want to have some fun too. Let me throw this to you here.
Sure.
What, as we wind down, what would you like to see for yourself and council in general over the length of your term that's left?
I was just asked about this from CVille Weekly, and so I hate to steal their thunder, but I really think it's important as this new council comes in, and we've had a new transition, and obviously our city's administration. We really have to go and be revisiting our strategic plan and really solidly align on that. That is going to serve as the foundation from which everything else will happen. So that along with our comprehensive plan and things I was talking about earlier with the housing strategy, those foundational set of kind of guidelines that we all are following is going to allow everything that we want to move forward in a more productive and expedient way. And until we really kind of have that foundation lying, I feel like our city is kind of spinning around knee-jerk reaction, and we have to have a plan. And so I think that it's been hard in the last 2 years because there's been so much transition and a lot going on, but we're at a really ripe opportunity right now to really lay that groundwork and foundation from which future councils can then build on.
I think you're in a perfect spot right now.
Me too.
Absolutely. You've said that spot on. New council members, fresh council, fresh staff, make some magic happen. Can we have fun?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, you got to turn your notes over.
Why?
We didn't tell you we were going to run the gauntlet?
No, I did not.
An ice box in here.
That's what Judah says.
Dude, I should have kept my coat.
I like it cold. All right, you want to go?
We have 2 minutes. I have to go.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's okay.
No, give her 2 questions.
Oh my God, what is this about? I'm scared now.
Look at it. No, so we just asked fun questions. So I'm going to start off.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a little bit about,
We got 60 seconds.
a little bit, okay. Thank you. Best piece of advice you've ever been given and why?
Oh, I don't even know.
Come on.
This is like serious. After an hour, I'm going to get this kind of like
Yep.
reflective talk.
You crushed this hour, though.
Okay, so I'll give you a pass on that one.
I really want to think about that one, but
Okay.
I only have 30 seconds. So
I'll ask you a different question while you're thinking about that question. So you're on a deserted island.
Uh-huh.
You're only allowed to bring one book with you.
Oh,
What would that book be?
if I'm by myself for
You're by
perpetuity-
yourself.
I mean, this
You're-
is going to sound so cheesy, but I'm probably going to bring like a photo book of my kids.
Oh, that's not cheesy.
It's not a reading thing, but if I'm going to be that lonely for a while, I need to have that.
I got to
connection
tell you,
with my kids.
that's probably the second best answer
Yeah,
we had.
that's a good one.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to tell her what you bring?
I always bring the Marine Corps survival manual because if I'm living on a deserted island, I want to know how to survive.
But you know what?
That's a good answer.
You have
That's a good answer.
survived. How long have you been on council now?
2 years.
You've survived 2 years on council. She can survive a deserted island by herself.
I think you got it covered.
Yeah.
So best advice, what do you think?
Oh, I couldn't even begin. I'm so sorry that I'm falling short of this
Don't
answer, but
apologize.
That's a very big question, and I feel like I've been well advised. I will say the words that I'm living by right now. I'm not saying it's the best advice I've ever given. Is that I get emotional. Is to focus on the signal and set aside the noise, because I think that too often the noise can drive so much of our lives, and I tell that to my other leader friends, that just be able to set aside the noise and have that focus on the signal. And those are words that I live by every day right now.
That's a great stopping point right there.
I think you did
Okay.
an
Yeah.
outstanding job on that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Heather.
for
Seriously,
having
everything.
me.
I know
Yeah.
she's got to rush, run out.
Yeah, happy holidays to
Merry
you
Merry
both,
Christmas. Merry
and
Christmas.
we'll reconvene with whomever I can in the
You
new year.
are-
We'll come back with John. I would love to do that.
You
I'd love
rock.
to come with Elizabeth. Yes, thank you for having me.
We are lucky to have Heather Hill, guys, in Charlottesville, Virginia. Please understand that.
I will tell you, my whole trip down to the Caribbean, I was taking notes because this was a very important conversation to me. So thank you very much.
I'm glad to
Thank
be
you
here.
very
And
much.
again, sorry
Thank you
John
very
isn't
much.
here, but we look forward to returning, and we'll definitely cover the
Say
gamut with him.
prayers, little prayers for him and his
Guys, this is Real Talk, powered by the Yes Team. Enjoy your morning. Have a good weekend. Keep it local here in Charlottesville. Take
Amen.
care. Hey. Awesome. Awesome.
As always, brother.
Got real quick, we got to snap a pic, package it, and Heather, we will get you out of here.